Great Responsibility, Chapter 24, Fitness Test. Piper rolled her eyes as everyone laughed at Flash's joke at her expense. She spotted her team across the cafeteria and made her way over to them. Sam scooted over and Piper sat down next to him, smiling slightly. She nudged him slightly. "Good job with Batroc the Leaper last night." Sam shook his head, hiding a slight smile as he replied,
"The only thing you've been right about so far is that sandwich. Best I've had in a long time."
Piper grinned and held out her hand for a fist bump. Sam grudgingly obliged, and the rest of the team stared. Danny grinned and shook his head slightly as Acting Principal Coulson began to speak again.
"And lastly, due to an unfortunate accident, your regular gym teacher, Mr. Moleskin, will be in the hospital for the foreseeable future. This is your temporary gym teacher, Mr. Yeager."
A tall man in shorts and a tank top, with a sweatband around his head, smiled from the corner and stepped forward.
"I look forward to unlocking each of your hidden talents."
Piper frowned. Did that sound like a veiled threat to anyone else? The others at the table shrugged, and Piper waved at Harry as he slipped into the room. He grinned and made his way over as Acting Principal Coulson finished his announcements. MJ joined them at the table and grinned at Piper. She leaned around Harry and spoke. "Did you hear? There's a rumor going around that Spider-Girl really does go to this school." Piper laughed, trying to hide any of her nervousness. "Yeah, right. Why would Spidey ever go to school here? Or in the first place?" Harry shrugged.
"I don't know, Piper. It's kind of cool to think that there might be a superhero at our school."
Piper shrugged. Harry laughed.
"Of course you wouldn't think that's cool."
Piper giggled as the bell rang and they headed off to their classes. If there was one thing in school Piper absolutely hated, it was gym class. She'd always hated gym. Originally, it had been because she wasn't very good at it. Then, when she hit high school, it was because she was teased because she wasn't as fit as some of the other girls. But now, she hated gym for an entirely different reason. She could easily beat the course that was currently being explained by a pre-recorded image of her Uncle Steve. Easily. With barely any effort, she could ace gym like she aced her other classes, but she chose not to. She chose to suck at gym to keep people safe, to keep her identity a secret. The good feeling she got from doing the right thing didn't make getting nailed in the head with a dodgeball thrown by Liz Allen any more fun, though. Sam laughed and picked up the ball.
"Is that your face print, Parker?"
He laughed as he held out a hand to her and helped her to her feet as Mr. Yeager blew his whistle.
"All right, enough messing around. This test is also to determine who the school will send to the All-State Championships for the Captain America fitness test."
Piper frowned. That didn't make sense. Since when was there a competition for this? She couldn't remember one.
"We only have one available position. Let's get started."
He had the boys run the course first, then the girls. Piper couldn't help but shiver as he looked over the girls while Sam finished his run on the course. He was freaking creepy. Sam danced over to her with a grin on his face.
"Bet you can't beat that time, Parker."
Piper rolled her eyes as the girls started going through the course. "I could beat your time, if I wanted to, Buckethead." "I don't want to. It'd give too much away." Sam shook his head as Piper rolled her eyes at him.
"Come on, Webbs, let's see you do it."
Mr. Yeager shouted from across the gym. "Parker, are you gonna stand there all day? Run the course." Piper frowned and stretched. She could easily flip and climb through this course faster than even Ava, who had the best score so far, but she didn't. Instead, she faked struggling up the wall, gingerly climbing down before pretending to slip and fall. Mr. Yeager sighed and checked his clipboard. "All right, Watson and Allen, Ayala, you three will come in tomorrow to run the course again and find out which one of you makes the cut. Everyone else, anemic." Sam made an annoyed sound. "What? I aced that course. Come on, coach." Piper shook her head. Sam made an angry noise as he stomped back over to her. "Come on, Parker, I want to see if I can beat your time when you're really trying." Piper shook her head. "Sam, I don't want to compete with you. It's stupid." Sam rolled his eyes. "Come on, we'll come back tomorrow after they're done. Nobody has to know." Piper rolled her eyes again as Danny and Luke headed off for the locker rooms. Ava was dancing around, apparently happy to be picked. "Sam, you can run that course tomorrow, but you're going to have to do it without me." I have things to do tomorrow. Tomorrow was the day she had set aside for her training with Uncle Clint, and also sleep. Sam rolled his eyes. Can't take a challenge, eh, Parker? Piper flipped him off as she left for the locker rooms. The rest of the school day passed in a blur, and soon she was being pulled into detention and whisked off to the helicarrier. This time, Dr. Connors met her in the main hangar. She smiled under her mask as he dragged her off to a different lab. This one was full of deactivated LMDs. Piper raised an eyebrow under her mask. "What's up, Doc?" Doc Connors turned to her. "This is your lab. I managed to convince Director Fury to give you your own space to work because of the number of life model decoys that need reprogramming. I went over the coding, and it is a work of genius. Have you ever taken an IQ test, Spider-Girl?" Piper nodded. "I have, actually. Reed Richards had me take one. I scored just a few points over what he got at the same age. That was about a year ago." Dr. Connors smiled and nodded. "That is quite impressive, but not too surprising. We need to reprogram these LMDs so they meet the same requirements for Save the Citizens that the ones you've already reprogrammed meet." Piper nodded. "Shouldn't be too hard. We just have to clone the programming from one of the ones I've already reprogrammed." Dr. Connors nodded and left to get one of the LMDs she'd already reprogrammed. Piper grinned and began to take apart the backs of the heads of the LMDs in the room. Chapter 25, Stuck at School. Piper slept in to about 10 the next morning. She changed into her workout clothes and met Uncle Clint in the shooting range. He handed her one of his spare compound bows. "All right, baby bug, this one's a test of control more than a test of strength. You need to not break that bow. The draw on it is only about 150 pounds. It's pretty small, but you also need to hit your target. Don't worry about us getting caught at this. Your dad is out at a Stark Industries event in Washington." Piper nodded, and Clint hit the switch to start the targets moving. Piper took a deep breath and carefully pulled back. It took concentration to not pull the bow too hard and break the string. She aimed and fired, grabbing another arrow out of the quiver on her back and firing again. She continued, spinning and leaping into the air as Clint upped the difficulty. She flipped and released, just hitting the outer edge of her target. Clint stopped the movement of the targets and smiled. "You're getting better, baby bug." She had hit almost all of her targets this time, only missing 6 out of 30. She wiped her brow. "Yeah, webs are a bit more forgiving than arrows. Wider surface range for a hit." Clint nodded, a grin on his face. "I know, baby bug. Your Uncle Steve wanted to see you in your gym when you were done here." Piper nodded, hugged Clint, and headed off. Her watch beeped, but she ignored it. Fury knew she was training with the Avengers right now. She made it up to her level and skipped into her gym. "Hey, Uncle Steve." He was standing next to her weights. They were a similar design to the ones he had in his private gym that could be adjusted mechanically to simulate any weight. He smiled at her. "Come on over, Piper. We're gonna up your weights today." Piper grinned and slid onto the bench, laying back and wrapping her hands around the bar. She was up to 1,500 pounds. Steve flicked on the machine. Piper had helped him learn how to use it. Tony had tried, but he was just too condescending. "We're gonna start you at 1,000 today, see if we can work you up to 18. Piper grinned and nodded, beginning her chest compressions with her Uncle Steve spotting her, moving the weights up by 100 pounds every 10 or so minutes. She hit 1,700 when her watch started beeping. She ignored it again, letting it ring through. It began to beep again, and she sighed. Steve switched off the machine, and Piper answered her communicator. It was Sam. "What do you want, Buckethead?" "Where are you, Webbs?" Piper rolled her eyes. "I'm at home. I told you I have stuff to do today. I don't have time for your stupid competition." Nova shook his head. "Listen to me for a minute, Webbs. I'm at the school. I came to see if I could beat Ava's time since you're being a spoilsport about it. It's nearly noon and no one's come out from the gym and the fence is electrified. Something doesn't feel right." Piper slid out from under the bar and sat up. "What do you mean the fence is electrified? I've been going to that school for almost 3 years. That fence isn't capable of being electrified." Nova rolled his eyes and shook his head. S.H.I.E.L.D. put up new security systems since they had a team at the school. But I think they may be malfunctioning. Piper frowned. Do you want me to come out there? Nova rolled his eyes again and nodded. Yeah, I already called Iron Fist. He's on his way. Power Man's stuck in extra training today. Hate to say it, but if Ava, Liz, and Mary Jane are trapped inside, we might need your help. I tried Colson, but I can't get through to him either. Piper nodded and stood. I'm on my way. Sam nodded and hung up. Piper turned to Steve, worry plain in her big blue eyes. Everything okay? He asked, and Piper shook her head. No, MJ might be in trouble. I need to go. Steve nodded as Piper raced off away from the gym, throwing off her tank top as she went. She skidded into her room and yanked on her costume top and hooked her hidden belt around her waist. She yanked on the bottoms and grabbed her gloves, pulling one on and yanking on her mask. She vaulted up the side of the building to the roof, where she stashed her Spidey cycle. She pushed it to its limits as she sped across town to Midtown High. It took her 5 minutes to get to the school, and somewhere in the back of her mind she was debating riding the spider cycle to school every day. But no, that would give away too much. She got there 2 minutes before Danny did. He left off a roof into the alley across from the school. Piper followed him, parking her bike behind a dumpster in front of Sam, who was in everything of his costume but his helmet. Danny handed over the golden helm, and he slipped it on. Only then did he start glowing. Piper filed that away as they spoke. All right, Nova, what's going on here? Nova glided across the street and nodded to the fence. He grabbed a rock off the sidewalk and tossed it into the fence. It sizzled and fell to dust on the other side. Piper winced. Okay, don't touch the fence, I guess. Piper took a few steps back and effortlessly flipped over the fencing. She landed softly on the other side. Nova flew after her, Iron Fist flipping with him. All right, almighty team leader, what do we do? Piper adjusted one of her gloves. You're probably right about it being a malfunctioning security system. If I can get to the main controls, I can do a hard reset. Should be able to fix the problem. But there's one problem. I don't know where the main controls are. Nova nodded and turned to Iron Fist. They are most likely in Principal Coulson's office. Spidey nodded and turned back to the school. All right then, safest way to do this is to split up. Iron Fist, you go to the gym and make sure everyone's okay. Nova, you're with me. We're going to get in as close as we can to Principal Coulson's office, but we're likely going to have to fight through at least some of the malfunctioning security system. Nova nodded and the group split, Danny heading for the gym doors and Piper and Sam heading for the south entrance. They slipped in easily enough, and that made Piper frown a bit. Who electrifies a fence and leaves a door unlocked? Nova shrugged, and they raced off. Piper called out a warning as her spidey sense went crazy and pulled Nova aside as the trophy case turned impossibly and began spitting trophies at them. Will you listen to me for once, Lightbulb? He looked a bit amazed under his mask. How did you know that was going to happen? I have this sense that goes off when there's danger. I call it my spidey sense. It borders on precognition. Nova raised an eyebrow, then remembered that she couldn't see his eyebrows. What? I can sense danger before it happens, okay? Nova shrugged lightly. He'd heard weirder. Her powers were just getting cooler by the day, though, and he couldn't help but feel like it really wasn't fair. He followed her down the hall. They heard a manly cry for help a few halls over, and Spidey immediately detoured. Nova swore and followed. They found Stan the janitor pinned to the wall with a large metal claw. Piper grabbed the claw and pulled, Nova pulling Stan out of harm's way. Once he was safe, Piper let go of the claw and it slammed into the wall. Mucho malfunctioning security system. You should get out of the building as soon as possible. Stan nodded and grabbed his mop before taking Spidey's advice and heading for the nearest exit. Spidey leapt up the wall and raced along the ceiling as Nova flew along next to her. Why do you like the ceiling so much? Piper shrugged as she continued to run, leaping over light fixtures. I don't know. It's just more comfortable. She flipped off the ceiling, landing on the floor in front of Principal Coulson's office. The door was shut and locked. Piper yanked hard and the knob came off in her hand. Somebody really doesn't want us getting in there. Can you blast down the door without hurting anything or anyone on the other side? Nova nodded and melted the hinges and doorknob. The door fell inwards, revealing a sight Piper was certain she was never going to be able to unsee. Agent Coulson was stripped to his tidy-whities, dangling over a vat of what looked like acid. "Stop! Don't come in here!" Piper covered her eyes and shot a web at the top of the acid vat, covering the dangerous liquid. "Appreciated, Spider-Girl, but you need to get out of here now, both of you. Taskmaster has corrupted the security system." Piper raised an eyebrow. "Who is Taskmaster?" Coulson continued. "He's a mercenary for hire. Hates me, hates Fury. Highly trained tactician and weapons expert. He's also a combat chameleon." Piper couldn't help but chuckle. What, was he bitten by a radioactive chameleon or something? Nova rolled his eyes. "Bugbrain, you are such a dork." There was a loud female scream, and Piper whirled. "MJ!" She raced off, Nova swearing and following. Neither of them heard Agent Coulson shout after them. "Do not fight Taskmaster. He sees you do it, he can do it."